Jim Wright, my supervisor, advised me to quickly tour the hotel to get an idea of the scope of the electrical improvements required. He was in his office with the hotel owners simultaneously. I walked around the pool area, deftly avoiding telling anyone I was doing my damnedest to absorb all the best looks I could possibly find. That was when I observed a 40-something red-headed fox speaking with a man, clearly several years younger than she. The man's hand was on her left knee as they had pushed their lounge chairs together. In this way, his elbow was always in touch with the kindly shaped left chest. I left the pool area right away, only relaxing when I was well out of sight of the pool. I considered my choices for 20 seconds total. Though I momentarily thought through the consequences, I knew exactly what I had to do. I saw just one moral line of action. I grabbed my cell phone and sent a brief note to my manager. I moved back to the pool area deliberately, trying to be as invisible as I could. With the camera feature of my phone on show, I stood in the shadow of an above balcony. Counting carefully to 25, I started filming the couple I had observed earlier. The woman was now resting on her lounge chair with her top undone, while the man gently sloppily applied sunscreen to her back, especially noting her amazing side chest area that was thrust out from beneath her body and was on a stunning display. Just a few seconds into videoing, an apparently furious man hurried up to the pair. He grabbed some of the lotion applier's hair and quickly wrenched his head back. This let the man's throat and chin show. As the enraged man's fist struck Romeo's throat, I could clearly hear the whack. A second blow, this one to the man's chin, followed right away. The man who had been carrying to the gorgeous redhead a few short seconds ago was now laying on the apron of the pool, producing terrible retching noises as blood spilled from his mouth onto the pool deck. The woman hardly had time to turn around to see the very enraged man rubbing his fist as he stood over her, since all had transpired so quickly. That lasted a few seconds before he reached for her red tresses. "Jim," was all she managed before he yanked her to her feet by the hair on her head. Still recording, I caught her as the man turned her around to face him. Glancing at his wife's panic-stricken face, "You cheating woman," was all he managed. Though I momentarily feared he might strike her, fortunately he controlled his fury and only shoved her backward into the pool. He then started tossing plastic tables and chairs across the deck, then noticed me standing off to the side. He slumped somewhat conspicuously before charging my way. "Jason, get me to the truck before I land up in jail," was all he managed as tears started running down his face. Jim followed me to the parking lot and into the business pickup. By now he was a real zombie, devoid of feeling and fixated ahead as I headed toward the freeway. Except for the odd guttural sound coming from Jim's throat, the 2-hour trip home was eerily quiet. I walked him into the home from his driveway. I parked there. Jim sat at the kitchen table as I took 2 beers straight from the refrigerator. One I put in front of him, then popped the other open for me. I dropped across from him into a chair. His relentless gaze made me somewhat uneasy. After several seconds of staring him in the eyes, I finally said, "Did we get the contract?" Blinking at my inquiry, Jim burst into violent gales of laughing. He murmured, "You dumb," opening his drink and drawing a long pull. Though it was dumb, my question got Jim out of his stupor. That lying, cheating lady informed me she would be spending some days with her mother at the lake cabin owned by her parents. She left early yesterday. She was most likely with that damned Harris since yesterday afternoon. Hell, this morning I asked to talk to Rachel by calling the cabin of her mother. Her mother informed me she was in the shower, but she would have her call in a few minutes. 10 minutes later, Rachel called me. I reasoned that if she was in her mother's bathroom at the lake at 10 o'clock this morning, she could not have driven to the Timber Brook by the time you found her with that jerk Harris, suggesting her mother was covering for her. Her mother covered for her and understood quite well what the heck Rachel was doing. Jim agreed with me once again. Hell, since we were married, she has been summerly visiting her mother at the cottage. I now wonder if that jerk was the first or only one among many, and how long this has been going on. Jim made a valid argument, and as I headed home, I gave it some thought from every conceivable direction. Jim's wife seemed helped and enabled in her infidelity by her own mother, and even likely Could it be a hereditary quality or just some kind of weakness cultivated for decades? My mother-in-law's automobile was there when I pulled into my driveway. Knowing my wife, Tracy, would be seated at the kitchen table sipping wine with her mother, I parked and wandered to the rear door instead of listening to her babble. As is customary, I was right. The volume of the discourse surprised me the only little. To be honest, both the volume and the topic startled me a little. "Holy crap, Mama!" Tracy almost yelled at her mother. "You know Dad dislikes jerk. What in heck were you thinking?" Tracy's disgust at her mother's behavior made me somewhat proud of her. She and I had promised to be faithful all through our married years. On that, Tracy and I most definitely agreed. Kindly refrain from calling Bentley jerk. That turned out to be a terrible incident. Besides, Rachel insisted, he's still very good. That's hardly the issue here, Tracy answered. Only 2 hours from home, you were out in broad daylight with a man other than Dad. Though I advised you against letting your guard down, you did it nonetheless. We seemed far enough from home to be safe. Why your father was there or how he came upon us beside the pool is unknown. He never stays in hotels, and most definitely not visits their pools. Do you suppose he is cheating on me? Rachel responded. No, Tracy answered. I neither do. Mom loves you. He wouldn't have cheated, and I'm sure he had no clue you would have him wearing horns. His response was thus quite aggressive. Seeing jerk rubbing lotion on you must have stunned him. Rachel said, Bentley was merely dabbing moisturizer on the chest sides. He was an impeccable gentleman. He was indeed. Dad throat punched him, then fractured his jaw for no apparent reason. Mom, how would you approach this? Dad seems to be pretty agitated, Tracy asked. If it would be possible, I would like to spend a few days with you until your father cools off. Jim loves me, as you know. He'll overrule this small error. Tracy advised maybe as long as he doesn't learn about any of your prior faults. You know those wouldn't go over nicely. As Tracy pointed out, Rachel had made previous blunders. They were known to my wife. Her mother's being with Jerk didn't appear to surprise her that much. This material was unsettling. Hearing their chat and not wanting them to know I was in the home, I silently left the rear entrance and rounded to the front. As I was opening the door, mother and daughter stopped talking. I strolled to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, nodding to the now quiet pair. I realized they were waiting for me to provide some indication of my expertise. They had no idea how much I understood about the events of the day. I spun and headed upstairs to shower. They had to be curious about my knowledge, my response, what I would say, and whom I would inform. I chose to let them remain wondering. The whole thing was unpleasant as hell, and Tracy's involvement in it was unsettling, to put it mildly. Tracy clearly knew her mother cheated around, but she never told her father or me about it. Boggled my head. From what I knew, keeping a secret like that was the same as lying. Tracy entered the bedroom immediately after I had completed dressing in some fresh clothing. Mom and Dad argued somewhat today. Mom wants to stay with us a few days till they can resolve their conflict. She could, I informed her. Tracy asked, I hope you don't mind. I wondered cynically, what kind of husband would I be if I opposed to my wife's mother staying a few days? Your parents call for particular thought. See how wonderfully your dad has been to me. I said, he's really a wonderful man. Tracy seemed to be looking at my face for any hints about my mood. She appeared to flinch a little when I mentioned her father, but that could have been my imagination. One of the reasons I love you so much, Jason, is Tracy answered. You always treat my family and me like we're special. I've spent 5 years working with your father. He is unique, and I knew him before I met you. He hired me for my first paid job. He is the best parent a girl could possibly have, a wonderful father-in-law and a decent boss. My compliments of her father seemed to satisfy Tracy less than they should have for some reason. I never noticed it before, but it suddenly seemed to me Tracy felt some shame over her mother's illicit activities. Had I merely been blind before this? Rachel asked me questions about work part through the dinner. She wanted to know what we were bidding on, what projects we had ongoing, and where I had been working that day. She seemed to be fishing to learn how much I knew, and how Jim came to be at the same hotel where she had experienced a jolt the evening before. I steered clear of any reference to my part in the swimming pool denouement or Jim's bidding on an upgrade at hotel fornication. I had determined that others besides my wife and her mother may have secrets. I said I was going to cut the grass after supper. My suspicions dominated my thinking, so I gently left my phone on record mode beneath a banana on the kitchen counter, safely away from the dishwasher. When I finally put the mower away, it was dark. In the living area, both women were watching Survivor on television. Before walking upstairs to the master bedroom, I pocketed my phone and bid them good night. After I left the house, I listened to the captured discussion my wife had with her mother. To put it gently, it was eye-opening. Plotting how to get Jim's forgiveness, the two women they batted over a few ideas, but essentially it boiled down to Rachel loving Jim foolish for as long it took for him to completely forgive and trust his wayward wife. My wife kindly advised Rachel to let Jim have intimacy now and then, and to keep up more love for him. Rachel had little interest in that alternative. Tracy laughed, wondering who knew jerk is huge in that field. To tell the truth, Rachel said, I had heard some tales. Mom mentioned it to me when she heard Mary Chase tell Sue Land about Bentley's size. Grandma mentioned that jerk had a great tool. Grandpa went on one of his golf excursions, and I find it surprising she neglected to try it on for scale. You are moving your eyes in waves. Tell me not the jerk had tried Granny, Tracy said in clear wonder. She's like 62 or something. It was some years ago, and Rachel said, I hope to look as good as Mom when I'm her age. Bentley seems rather happy to boast about his sleeping with a mother and daughter combo. He even wanted me to inquire whether he could go for the hat trick with you. Few males have 3 generations in a family, Rachel said. You're kidding me here. Tracy pointed out that he is practically Dad's age. I can't even picture being with him. How large is he ultimately anyway? Let's assume you wouldn't be let down, Rachel answered, sounding as though she was endorsing a decent hairdresser. Just be sure, Rachel said. I'm not bouncing a little Bentley grandkid on my knee. I never would start with that jerk, Tracy said, and I have never cheated on Jason. Jason should father whatsoever children we have. That is one item I will ensure of. I enjoy the man. I also enjoy your father. That's why this all seems so difficult. Rachel pressed, not wanting a divorce. Simply said, he comes home exhausted a lot and works many hours. We have been fortunate to enjoy intimacy few times a week. I wanted Bentley for this reason. Actually, Mom? And what about Jeff Stevens and George Marsh? And God just knows who else Tracy inquired of. The direction of this discourse bothers me. Let's head to see Survivor, Rachel said in a clear attempt to shift the topic. I believe Italian Woman will be voted off this week. Knowing I would be sleeping very little that night, I stored the chat on a flash drive and went to bed. I thought a lot about it. The work I did the next day hurt. Jim gave out work assignments to start the day and was disorganized. 5 of us worked for Wrights Electric, and we looked at each other while Jim stammered over his instructions. Jim and I collaborated on our present assignment as usual, so we hopped into the corporate truck's passenger side. We could converse freely without thinking about anyone listening in since we were wiring a house under development. Jim went all morning after he started sharing with me his circumstances. Though it helped to muddle my mental condition even more, I suppose it was cathartic for him. I was finding it difficult to fit the future I had imagined with what I had heard from my wife and her mother. Eventually, Tracy would seem to be a roaming wife like her mother, and apparently her grandmother. Could I be in her life enough to keep her faithful? Was it worth the danger of a broken marriage, or living life as a cold? Jim started as Rachel called me this morning. She wanted to apologize for the impression she could have given me that she was cheating with Bentley. She picks up the jerk, Bentley. She claimed that she only ever cheated once or very near. She had been pursued for months and at last gave in to his appeal. She started stuttering when I asked her how long her mother has been covering her affairs. She never considered it that I could clearly see her mother lying about her location. We traded a few nasty remarks, then I hung up. I wasn't sure whether I should forward Jim the material I had picked up from listening in on. Should he choose to reconcile, things would just get worse. Though I chose not to decide, I did it with great conviction. Jim, you should slow down and investigate what's actually happening. That might have been the first time, or maybe not. I advise you to give the matter some thought and weigh all the effects of your choice, whether you dump Rachel to the curb or keep her. I feel sorry for you, Jason. You work with me and are married to my daughter, so you find yourself stuck in this dilemma. I consider 25 years of life wasted. Without Tracy, I would say my marital life was a hollow show-through. The one saving grace is having a great daughter and trustworthy son-in-law, Jim said. When I got home that evening, I still wasn't sure about my next line of action. Tracy and her mother were all on me as soon as I got into the kitchen. Tracy said, slightly irate, "Dad informed Mom that you were the one informing him Mom was at the pool with Bentley. What type of moron seeks to ruin the marriage of his wife's parents? Really? What should I have done according to you?" More coolly than I felt, I asked. Rachel chipped in, saying Jim was close and to get the hell out of the pool area. That would have been the decent thing to do. You would lose the enjoyment of public jerk rubbing you. Though those naked bodies of yours were distracting as heck, I answered, thinking just of you. You and your mother were lying to Jim, not mine fault, Tracy asked, knowing her grandmother lying to Jim. This simply gets more and more bad, I said. You have no idea. You lied to help your mother and grandma keep their status even though you knew they were round-heeled adulterous ladies. Now you're all furious with me since your mother was damn dumb enough to allow a low-life bastard massage her in public, like somehow it's my fault. I'll stick to my choice to be upfront and honest with Jim while you two try to defend the things you have been dragging on your grandfather and father over all these years. Tracy's face showed concern as she thought over my comments. I never would, and I never have cheated on you. Unlike mother and grandmother, I am not. I loathed it, even though I tried to support their keeping of terrible secrets. I urged them to be loyal to their husbands and to call off their indiscretions. You did, Rachel questioned, before Tracy could gaze death at her. She did, Rachel abruptly agreed, as awareness of Tracy's suffering washed over her. She suggested Mom and I start towing the line, fidelity-wise, and stated she would never cheat on you. Though it never will happen again, I was wrong to let Bentley charm me. I swear, I know my lesson now. Were George Marsh and Jeff Stevens huge as well, or were they merely quite convincing, blurted before I could control my mouth? Tracy, did you mention George and Jeff to Jason? Did you turn on me to preserve your own rear? Demanded Rachel. If you hadn't told Jason about them, how might he find out? Not sure, wailed Rachel. You mentioned George and Jeff to Jim, and then what about Bill Simons? Does Jim know about him also? Not yet, I said with a grin. Given all the life-altering decisions involved, the next day at work was fascinating. I shared with Jim all I had heard his daughter and wife had discussed. He was furiously angry as hell, and then somewhat despondent. Jason, I don't see any choice here. I'm going to get divorced and call a lawyer. Try not to talk me out of it. I answered solemnly. I would not dream of it. I thought we would possibly get a better rate by using the same attorney. Tracy stated she has never betrayed you, though, Jim countered. You should not be divorcing Tracy for any reason. She loves you, I know she does. Though I know Rachel loves you, I wouldn't try to talk you out of a divorce. Jim, you were the one that guided me into mental clarity. Without your knowledge and expertise, I could find myself enticed to stay with Tracy. You told me you felt you had squandered 25 years by being married to. I don't want to be in a situation whereby I may say the same thing in 23 years. I don't trust your daughter anymore. Every day I would be fretting about her out search for a better man. Tracy would definitely insist on allowing Rachel and her mother to visit our children and impact their life darn well. I would worry leaving Tracy alone with my daughters. But letting your wife and her mother even interact with them terrifies me to death, I said. You can see why I cannot keep down that route, cannot you? 4 years later, I decided to take Amber, my wife, out on our second anniversary. 6 months old, our daughter Megan was more than welcome for Amber's parents to keep for the evening. It was our anniversary, so I went crazy for a stay at a Ritz, a drive of 100 miles. I looked forward showing my wife how much her love meant to me and had dinner plans. Having asked for a quiet table, I was happy when we were shown a very dark dining room corner. Amber abruptly sat up taller and fixed her eyes on the door after buying our meals and trading some jokes. "Not that of your ex-wife, then?" she inquiries. "She looked like a fashion model and attended 2 years ahead of me in school. She still radiates beauty. She remarried, I knew, but I have never seen her husband. He strikes me as rather older than she is." I turned to see my ex-wife seated across the room and said, "Actually, he's the same age as Tracy." "Well, he's had a difficult life then." Amber watched. "He seemed old enough to be her father. Her hubby is not this one." I sighed and said, "That guy just has one ball. 4 years ago, I chose the correct course. Having you with Tracy right now makes me happy and relieved." Now that her interest was aroused, Amber said, "What does her husband look like?" I answered softly as he resembled the man arriving at the door carrying a baseball bat in hand. I thanked my lucky gods. And thus ends today's narrative. Should you like it, kindly thumbs up this video and leave a comment below. The algorithm pushes my material farther, thanks in part to your support. Remember to mark that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. It certainly helps me maintain writing fresh tales for you. I appreciate you seeing. Next one will see you.